Welcome to NEK-TV Rocks, and my guest today is Rick Woodward, the brand new owner of Green Mountain Natural Foods. If I'd asked you 6 months ago, did you see yourself owning a health food store, what would you have said?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much. No. That's about the answer I have. You know, I think a lot of people probably know who have been around here for a while, you included, that this isn't my first time being involved with a health food store or the natural food store back in 2008, so I think we're 16 years back now. You know, a similar thing was happening with Steve Crevichet, who owned this Newport Natural Foods at that time.
Right.
And by the way, Newport Natural Foods I think it's approaching 60 years old. I know it's over 55 years old, just from conversation I had with Steve Crevichet.
It's a mature store.
It's a mature store. And back in 2002, my wife and I purchased the Montgomery Ward building. I had been a tenant there since 1990. And eventually purchased the building from Armand Belial.
Yeah.
And so, Louis Garneau was in there then, but even back then, other than Louis Garneau, which was a manufacturing facility, as you know, Newport Natural Foods was the anchor tenant. And all along with my vision of the Montgomery Ward building, that anchor tenant, Newport Natural Foods, I really never wanted or entertained to have anything else but that, type of a place in there. Steve Crevichet, it was a little bit for different reasons, but Steve Crevichet was very interested in trying. He was tired. He was burned out. He had been at it for whatever it was at the time, 40 years, I think. He was just wanting to get out. He had had the place for sale for a while.
Right.
And he wasn't having any takers, and I started realizing I was fresh at owning the Montgomery Ward building, but I was smart enough to know that I couldn't let that tenant go away. So myself, my wife, Fran, and we had some partners, the Knowles, Frank and Alicia Knoll, bought Newport Natural. And we had a 5-year plan. Wasn't really part of my career plan, but we had a lot of fun doing it. And I think we did make some strides. And then partway through that sort of tenure, we hired Steve Bro as an employee. And he was clearly overqualified. He came from upper level management at Whole Foods down in Florida. But both Frank and I mean, the two couples and I were thinking, he might be our out. And that's what ended up happening. Steve Bro bought the store from us back in 2013. I was partners with Steve for a short period of time, and I think it was a good partnership. And then he bought me out in 2013. And, I don't think I have to go through, but Newport Natural did some great things over the following years. But a similar thing happened with Steve in that I think he's a little older than I am, and I think he needed out, and he was involved with other ventures. And so we ended up doing the same thing again. And although it was a little different this time, or quite different, I should say. First of all, we had no partners. It's just my wife and I. And but as I think the community knows, could see that things were not going in a good direction. And so we did it a little differently this time. We didn't actually buy Newport Natural Foods. Steve still has Newport Natural Foods, and I think he's doing his real estate thing. But he did leave the property, and we started a new business called Green Mountain Natural Foods. And so here I am again. Again, we're going to have a lot of fun with it, I think. Right out of the gates, well, first of all, it was a very different situation because we didn't buy Newport Natural Foods. We started a new business. Everything started from scratch.
Right.
And we have a little over 200 vendors that we deal with. A lot of them local people, and of course a lot of them larger distributors outside the area. But the monumental task to getting that together was something else.
I'm sure it's not complete yet.
Well, it's not quite complete, but we're close. We're close. That's why
Wow.
I think I'm here to let you folks know that. But everything and things. It's been a while since I actually started a business from scratch. And things I've learned, and I think a lot of it is because of the pandemic and just the lack of staffing or what have you, but things just took a lot longer than anticipated. It took us, this transition, let's call it a transition, happened at the very end of January, in fact, on January 29th. I did not want to see, there was a plan at one time that we would actually close the store for 2 or 3 weeks. To get things ready.
Renovate.
I promised the staff right from the beginning, and I honored that promise that they would not skip a beat. So I was going to have the staff involved with helping us get going. We just realized for cash flow reasons, for many reasons that aren't worth going into, we decided to stay open. So it was a little disruptive to customers for a little while. We did all those renovations, redid the floors.
It was actually fun for a customer.
Yeah,
We
that's nice to
came
hear.
in and we were looking at what
you
was
could see the
different.
progress. Yeah, so that's nice to hear. So the renovations went really well. They were on schedule, on budget. They took whatever it was, 3-4 weeks. And I've known this for a long time with other businesses, but especially with this project, customers, if they are communicated to and if they know what's going on,
Right.
everyone's very understanding. And we didn't have any complaints about noise and stuff that was going on during the renovations. Anyhow, so the renovations took that, whatever it was, 3 or 4 weeks, and they're completed. I was very adamant. It wasn't super cheap for the renovations, but I was very adamant that when this formerly Newport Natural Foods came to life again and was rebranded, that people would walk through the door and see it looking fresher too. So that I think we accomplished.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and but so all along the time that the renovations were going on, and of course we didn't close, but we kept the staff going, and they are just rock stars. The staff. I mean, I have to say it time and time again. They first of all put up with the noise of the renovations, and this wasn't just a little bit of noise and the dust, and sales were way off during that time because for obvious reasons. But they really are rock stars, but I think they were excited too, So anyhow, so all along that time period, and in fact, probably a week before this transition took place, we started realizing, okay, this is going to happen. But it really was a very, very short time frame that the sort of the management staff had to start a new business from scratch. And that's the part that took so much longer than I was anticipating. Everything was applied for at the very beginning, that first week of February. Our EBT machine, our liquor license, all the health food licenses, the retail license, there's a lot. And I'd done that once before when we were involved before, but I do not remember it taking more than a week or two. And this took a full 2 months.
Yes.
We just got our liquor license last week, so we do have a fairly well-stocked.
Crazy, because that came. I was at the city council meeting, and
I
mentioned
know.
it 2 days later.
Yeah,
to the staff.
and it was
Hey,
still a
it's
month
passed.
after that.
That's ridiculous.
But anyhow, so that's the world we live in now.
Yeah.
But it's done.
Guess so.
We've now had 2 or 3 deliveries of wine and beer, and I think we have some of the stuff you'll see in other stores, but we try and be a little different.
Right.
And
So when's the party down there?
well, a lot of people about.
Tasting, why not?
Yeah, no, I think we will. We're going to get into, again, that kind of falls into
know.
some details that I just haven't had time, or we just haven't had time to deal with. But there's a lot of details that I'm thinking about. So EBT, the last one that had to come that we've been waiting on, it's just making me crazy because I know it's hard on a lot of people, but we're at the mercy of these
Bureaucracies.
Yes. And So we finally got the approval from the USDA, which is the federal governing body behind it through their SNAP program. And then when that happened, what are we, Thursday? So that happened on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we applied successfully for the Vermont part of it, which is the EBT, and the machine should be in within the next 3 or 4 days. So I think that's kind of the last, there was some really significant, our largest by far vendor took 2 months to get them organized too. Luckily we had some other vendors, a lot of other vendors to keep stuff coming in. But we really only saw, especially the basement, fully stocked. Luckily we made it by last Monday, or last weekend actually. Last week we got a lot of big deliveries in the basement. So I'm pretty comfortable in saying, other than a few more days waiting for the EBT machine, that we are back in pretty much normal shape and ready to roll.
So all of the Eclipse traffic that I assume came in.
It sure did.
Yeah, cleaned you out again.
Well, yeah. So listen, the whole place was busy. Okay,
That's great.
The whole city was busy.
Yeah. That's the good news.
We were apparently, other than Maple Fields, the only one that was open for like a breakfast hour that had coffee. So, for budget reasons, during this slow period of time before the eclipse happened, we cut our hours back in the morning from 8 to 9. It just allows the staff, they're still coming in at almost the same time, a little bit later, but what it is allowing them to do is get the prep work done and cleaning of the place done in a good way before we open, without any disruptions, So that's the main reason. We're hoping, I think we're going to go back to our regular 8 o'clock in the morning schedule for the summers, but we're going to kind of wait and see how that goes.
Yeah.
But back to the eclipse, there was people lined up outside the front door of the Montgomery Ward building before we opened the doors, which was at like 7:45 in the morning. And it just never stopped the entire day. But once again, the staff were such rock stars. I actually, I was there the whole day, of course, and I could see that they needed a break. And normally they do have breaks, of course, during the day, but this day it just wasn't an option. So I opted to just close the doors to the outside, because they were upstairs, not just involved with Green Mountain Natural Foods, but they were going upstairs into the workplace that we might chat about. Right. People camped out in the hallways, but you know what? There wasn't one bad incident. Right. Everyone was so thankful and so appreciative, and saying that our staff was just nothing but wonderful, and yet they were under some massive pressure.
I bet.
So we closed the doors for a few hours, gave the staff a break so they could go out and watch the eclipse as well. And I probably shouldn't be saying this, but they went up to the roof of the Montgomery Ward building, and they had an actually fantastic view of it's just spectacular the whole day. And yeah, we had a great day for sales, but more importantly is people were exhausted, but no one was burned out. They loved it. I think people tend to like being busy. Yeah, so it was good.
I mean, when I first moved here, Steve Crevichet was running the store. Yeah. Meredith was cooking the food.
Yes.
That store was one of the reasons we moved here.
I've heard that before.
We had other options in the area, clearly, but it was, wow, here's a store that feels like community to us.
Yes.
It's great. So we buy our house, we close our house, we come into the store that day, and Steve says, I'm gone.
Oh, so it was right around the time that we bought.
Yes.
Okay.
And he was, oh, how could you do that?
Yeah.
But we knew there was a plan then, because he told us there was to
take back then, I think we're taking a little bit of a different, there's still things being talked about, because again, we're still just coming out from the rubble of getting going. So we're only now starting to talk strategy, really, for the summer. For the most part, at the beginning, we needed to get up and running, get our feet on the ground, and get 100% of the vendors and licenses done. And then hopefully we can start breathing before it gets super busy in the summer again and deal with some of those details.
You have a community notice board. I've just seen that on Facebook.
That
it must
went up
be
yesterday.
Right.
Yep. That was one thing, another detail that was supposed to happen weeks ago, but we just ran out of time. But anyhow, so back when we first did it, our strategy, I think most people liked it, but it's hard to know if it works now. But anyhow, was to try and make it, we interviewed a lot of people. Interviewed, it's a strong word, but we talked with a lot of people in the community the first time around, saying, what do you like about the place? What do you not like about the place? And a big theme that you hear is that people can't get everything there. So they have to, there are a lot of people that's the only place they shop. But I admit, you'll see me in what is
I
it,
go
Newport
everywhere.
Village. Yeah, me too.
Everywhere.
Us too. But obviously, we try and get as much as we can there. So back then, we tried to make it a little bit more of a complete grocery store. That was okay back then because we still, our product line was still very distinct and different from the big box stores. The big box stores over the coming years started realizing, wait a minute, they're missing out on something here, natural food. And I'll say too that natural food doesn't necessarily mean organic food. There's no question about it. Most of what we sell there is organic, which does make it a little more expensive. But we also have conventional, non-organic options. But anyhow, it was becoming a little bit more and more difficult to carry almost the same or similar products to the big box stores and compete with them. Their buying power is just so much more than ours. There's so much in our store back then and now that we still have a niche on, such as the bulk foods downstairs, the spices, and I think that's the draw, and that's where you find the prices that are less than most other places. So we're in this time around, we're in this thought process of, okay, so how much do we want to try and compete with the big box stores? It's just very difficult to do. Or try and find, really hone in on the products that are specialty products, and that we can do better on price with. So I think that's the direction we're going. I don't want to tell people that you're not going to be able to find cans of soup and other things that you would normally put on your grocery shelves. We'll always have that. But I think we're going to really dive deeper into product lines like ethnic foods and that kind of thing to try and get, instead of trying to have our store a one-stop shop for people. That's a tall ask for a small place like that in a town that has, 3 big box stores for foods. And more of a place that you can find good deals on specialty items, and it's worth going there to make an extra trip on your way back from Vista or Newport Village Market or whatever. And I think that's kind of the direction that we're going to try and go in.
The ethnic part would pull me in every time.
Yeah,
I shop there anyway, obviously.
Too. And I do want to hear from customers with some ideas, and we've been hearing a lot.
I bet.
And depending on the question, a lot of it at the beginning was about the renovation, so we had answers for that. As far as exactly our direction, it's not going to stray that much. It's always going to be the same natural food store that we've had for over 50 years. It's just that we're going to try and really build up and focus on some niche items that are a little more difficult to find in the bigger stores.
One of the questions I hear a lot is about the cafeteria part and what used to be that wonderful buffet.
Yeah.
Is that coming back? Maybe not.
It's a great question, and it's not the first time I've been asked that.
I'm sure.
I always liked that. I think I might have been the one who was trying to get that increased. I think we all agreed with it back 15 years ago. The thing I would love to have it back is to answer your question. And I know customers liked it. It is very difficult in a small operation to manage that efficiently, because what that means is hiring, I think we had to have 2 full-time chefs.
Right.
to keep that going, and because just staggered shifts, basically one more responsible for the week and one more responsible for the weekend. That is so difficult today with as everyone knows, the phrase staffing issues, and expensive.
Yes.
To have 2 full-time chefs.
Absolutely.
And, of course, that went away during the COVID thing, and it was the previous owner that took that away. And I remember when he took it away, first of all, we had to because of what was going on.
Then.
But the fact that it didn't come back afterwards, I was like, I was kind of disappointed too. So I get it. I understand that people like it. It's not off the table. But we do need to be as efficient as possible and try and keep staffing costs, in control. And it's not just staffing costs, but it's, you just don't have a lot of chefs walking through your door saying, I'll be happy to do this. And then it goes beyond that. It's not just the chefs. It's the, of course, we have dishwashers now, but not nearly as much as you'd have if you had that hot bar. But it's not off the table, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the other one that's a personal one for me is I just hit my microphone and I've driven Kelby crazy with that, is less of the disposable stuff.
This is a big thing with me. You're talking about the recycling and that
I
kind
sure
of
am.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
This is a huge thing with me. I'm sensitive to the previous owner doing what he did, but I find it just extremely important to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And it is, I will say this, and this, I never talked with him about it, but I think it's the reason why he kind of took that away, was, as we know, with recycling, things need to be cleaned before putting it in recycling. That's an almost impossible task for a restaurant to do. To send essentially their recycling trash back to the kitchen to be washed and then brought back. A huge monumental problem, and I actually don't have the answer to that. But I do see it in other establishments, and actually in the coming weeks, we still have a few more slow months before we get busy again. So the management staff and myself are going to be doing some traveling around to visit other places, see what they're doing right, see what they're doing wrong. And I know of at least one that we're going to that has a very organized compost, recycling, trash bin.
Great.
And it's what I want to do, but I also need to make sure it's not just a superficial thing that makes people feel better. I want to make sure it's going to the right stream. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And who needs any more greenwashing, right?
Yeah. So it's more the compost is actually easier to deal with.
Yes.
What's difficult for a restaurant on the compost side, like we've been composting for 30 years at home since we lived in Newport. It's just a thing that we've always done, and it's easy to do. We own land. We have a spot where we bring our compost, and then we have some wonderful earth after a while. In the restaurant business, it's a very different thing because you have to rely on people to come in. And the previous owner did do that. And every once in a while, someone will come in and say they'll take our compost, and so we go back to it. But it's another thing that is a hindrance to a business, especially food services like a restaurant. People don't realize this. They just think that, well, we'll put our compost in this, we'll put our recycling in this, and trash in this. Well, the state wants you to clean the recycling, and then the compost needs to be taken by a licensed person who can dispose of that correctly. So I think we've been through, and if anyone's listening that can help us out, please come and see me or somebody, because we've been through, I don't know, 3 or 4 different people that will come and take our compost. Every one of them has stopped doing it. So it just leaves us in another lurch, of what to do. I think we have someone doing it now, but whether that works out or not, I heard the other day that he's in a bit of trouble with the state because he's not doing it properly. It is a massive problem, especially for businesses. For, like I said, for residential people, it's easy to do, and everyone should be doing it. Businesses, we want to do it, and we're going to figure it out. But it's not an easy task for a business that has. We have roughly 2 250 people go through those doors every day, and a great deal of them are throwing stuff in the recycling and in the compost. I think a lot of the answer is going to rely in educating the person who's doing that. We can't afford to hire someone new to just take care of cleaning and recycling, but we can attempt to educate the people coming to make sure they clean their stuff that's going to be recycled as best as possible before putting it in the recycling bin.
Great.
But it is coming.
Good.
It is one of those details
Yeah.
that we haven't quite gotten to yet, but it's coming soon.
What are some of the other plans that may or may not happen, but the vision? What's the vision?
It's a good question. All along the vision has been, I don't like to fix something that ain't broke, so to speak.
Right.
But there are some things that we've identified that we might want to try and change. Even our menu, our cafe menu. I'll also stop by saying, the first time around and this time around, I was never in the retail business before. Mm-hmm. I'm a commercial real estate. I don't sell or buy commercial real estates, but I own buildings and I rent out buildings. When we did it the first time around, we were totally green in both circumstances. And actually, Steve Crevichet worked for us for a little while, and so it made it easier on us the last time around. But I really do rely on the staff to tell me how to run this retail business. I was an owner for 5 years back then, so I learned a lot,
right?
Of course, but I still feel like I'm out of tune with. Right. But we have staff there.
They've been there forever. They're great.
Yeah. Allison's been there as long as I've owned the building and longer, and a few others actually.
Right.
So they're just wonderful. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without them, that's for sure. So it's going to be, I like telling people that same heart, same staff, different name is what we've got going on there. So we're going to stay true to what people expect. I'm hoping to maybe, I don't want to use the word improve because I think we've got a pretty good menu, but I would love to bring in some new, it's been like this for quite a while. Mm-hmm. I'd love to bring in some new things in the cafe menu.
The vegetarians amongst us would love it.
Yeah. Well, so I think you can find some vegetarian things there, can't you? Like the shrumini and various things. But
we could find more.
Of course. Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome idea.
No, the store is wonderful. I mean, clearly it's an integral part of this community. And when we in the community watched it shrinking, and some of that was COVID, I mean, it just continued that spiral. So watching this open back up is wonderful for all of us. How does the store fit in with your other property that's in that same building?
Yeah,
which is, again, really innovative.
Yeah. So I do own a few commercial buildings downtown.
Mm-hmm, we've
but
noticed.
the other ones are, and it's not that many. I'm not a huge landowner. I just happen to own some on Main Street.
Yeah.
But those are more. The other ones are more traditional kind of leases.
Yeah.
Single tenants. The Montgomery Ward building is very different. I think I mentioned at the beginning I was a tenant for the first however many years, 5-6 years, and Louis Garneau left the building, and I'm guessing here, but I think they occupied about maybe 60% of the building. And then Newport Natural at the time, owned by Steve Crevichet, owned, I don't know, 20% of the building.
Right.
The rest were some other people, including myself. Louis Garneau just up and left, and Armin, who's a little older than I am, just was, he didn't see how he could fill that void again. He came to me saying, would you ever be interested in buying the building? And at that point, I was not involved with commercial buildings. Mm-hmm. He ended up financing it, And I did. That's
And
how
you
I got
became
started.
involved.
And I became involved. And the interesting part of the story is I was born and brought up in Montreal, and but grew up just over the border here. So I've been coming to Newport my entire life. But when I was in Montreal, I had a small business, and it was in a what they would call an incubator style business,
Right.
a building for small businesses to get started. It was an awesome, I thought, concept. And this was long before co-working. I mean, decades before co-working was a thing, like WeWork and that kind of thing. But they were on to something there. It wasn't a huge place, but it was probably maybe the size of the Montgomery Ward building, a little bit smaller maybe. They had a lot of small offices, and very cheap to get started.
Right.
They were sponsored by the province of Quebec, which I'm not sponsored by. You know, it's my own money and the bank's money. But what they did was they started people off at a super cheap rate, like stupid cheap, you know, $25 a month for a small office or whatever. But it would go up every quarter.
Sure.
And significantly, until in about 3 months' time, you're above a market rate. So basically, it forced people out. But it allowed them to get started with a small amount of money. But more importantly than that was the shared concept of that facility. They had a shared conference room, several shared conference rooms. They had shared computers and that kind of thing. There's a common reception area. So when I moved to Newport, I just never got that out of my mind, that concept. And when I ended up buying the building, and I remember telling the previous owner of the building that I thought it was a tall order for him to try and find another Louis Garneau right on Main Street.
Right.
That's not the way. This was back when retail was still pretty healthy on main streets. And I never saw that working. I never went down that path trying to get a big tenant like that to occupy.
No.
So I went the exact opposite route and tried to get a lot of small tenants. So right off the bat, I didn't have too much capital, so I started building like 2 offices at a time. I'd try and get them filled, and then I'd build another 2 offices, and I went that way for 5 or 6 years until I had pretty much, a lot of offices with the exception of the 3rd floor. But again, more importantly, it was all about the shared concept. And right from the get-go, I had all of my offices occupied. So something was working and clicking. We had a shared conference room. We had shared computer room. So people coming to me with a small business or getting started thought that they needed this amount of space and realized they can get away with a lot more space because there's a common reception area. There's a place where you can do fax machines and photocopies, and some people might not know what a fax machine is here listening, but but it was all about the shared concept, and so that kept growing and growing and growing, and into something significant, and for the most part full most of the time, just as small businesses, but a lot of them. The other thing I liked about that model was not all my eggs were in one basket, like it kind of was with the previous owner, and there was 2 tenants that occupied, whatever it is, 90% of the place.
And when they were
That's
gone,
a lot
they
of
were
risk.
gone. Yes,
that was a big risk. This, I had people sort of coming and going fairly regularly, but it wasn't that big of a hit, you know. And then the last push, which was a big push, which was in 2018, I still hadn't done the top floor. Green Mountain Farm to School was up there, and Mark Stewart's architecture office was up there. But it, wasn't air conditioned. It was hot up there. It was just wide open. There's a few things, but I always thought that I could get more revenue for that floor if it was properly built out with central air conditioning and heating and with vertical access. So elevators I've been looking into them since the beginning of buying the building, and they're just crazy expensive. Far more than the cost of my house expensive, So it wasn't an easy nut to crack, but when we became a downtown designated area, I was able to take advantage of some tax credits. So that helped me do that final push on the third floor, which we built out 5 years ago. It'll be 6 years ago this.
Is that really
this
that
summer.
long ago?
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah,
Put the elevator
that's crazy.
in, and then the last thing that happened was, because up until then it was pretty much, it was all these small offices. Of course, on the ground floor is retail, with back then it was
Right.
Newport Natural Foods, and the basement, Newport Natural Foods. But then on the upper floors were these small offices, but they were traditional small offices, like they'd sign a lease, and most of them were by the year or whatever. The next step we took was co-working, which was a
Right.
thing that was happening. It's a trend. And we went and visited a bunch of, I had my daughter involved with the design of the place, and we went and visited other co-working spaces around the state to get ideas, and we decided to go that route. So basically co-working, for those of you who don't know, it's not unlike a gym membership. Instead of signing a lease and it's your space that you have a key to, like a traditional office, you become a member. It's only $65 a month for use of the facility 24/7, and you get to use these professional looking and functioning with printers and all kinds of amenities and comfortable space 24/7, unlimited. And there's no commitment, so you could try becoming a member 1 month, and if it's not working, you stop.
Right.
And that's become a good move.
Yeah.
If you take any three of those, so basic concepts of the types of people that participate in the Montgomery Ward building, from retail on the ground floor, from the regular private office lease space, primarily on the second floor, and then the co-working space on the third floor, any one of those in Newport on their own would be a tough business to stay in. But the three of them together, and
works.
especially with the food store and the cafe on the ground floor, really meld well together.
Yeah.
And it's just worked for me. And it's just,
It works for Newport.
well, yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's big enough. It's not a huge building, but it's 27,000 square feet, and there's enough tenants in there that it's its own little ecosystem.
Right.
And we've got Brian, who's an accountant who does half the building's tax returns and financial planning. We've got a couple of lawyers in there that I know help people out. It just goes on and on and on, and so that I really get a kick out of. You know, to see the tenants mingling with one another, not only socially but also business-wise.
And some of them bringing their meetings downstairs to the cafeteria, which is perfect. We are out of time.
Oh, my goodness.
And you thought you could only fill 10 minutes.
I know. I thought maybe
remember
I could
that
give
discussion.
you 2 or 3 minutes. I tend to ramble on and on.
It's okay.
Did you get all your questions answered?
I certainly got all my questions answered, and a lot of the answers are wait and see, which is fine. And it's really wonderful knowing that there's an opportunity for those of us living here to have input.
Yeah.
And you have an opportunity to use some of the community as volunteers.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know about the volunteers part, but that would be awesome. But I do have an open door policy.
Yeah.
Anyone can walk upstairs on the second floor, knock on my door, and come in with thoughts and ideas that they have.
Thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for being the visionary who took a building and turned it into home for so many of us.
That's awesome. And thank you again for having me.
Welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.